On this episode of Through the Pines, we'll discuss 5 questions to ask your partner to ensure you are on the same page financially. So, number 1 is a hypothetical question, so that's a tease. We'll go over that one. Number 2, how much money do you need? Number 3, what happens if one of us were to die? Number 4, what happens if one of us becomes disabled? And number 5, how do you feel about our current financial strategy? Yes, we are not here to cause fights with your spouse, your partner, your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. But listen, if you're going to be serious about your finances, you're going to protect yourself and your relationship in the future, these are 5 questions that you should cover. And we'll go over those in detail here on this episode. So welcome to a financial planning podcast with the down-to-earth vibe. Sasquatch listens while sipping coffee, listen to a live DJ during drips and drops. This is Through the Pines. Our advisors for this episode, we welcome back into the trailer Rex Baxter and Brandyn Smith with planwithbaxter.com. 2023, 2024, 2025. We're just going to keep going. 2026.
Keep running it.
Forbes best in-state wealth management teams for you. So who's your competition? Shall not be named. I mean, I don't.
Yeah. I can't even remember who those guys are.
Okay.
Shots fired.
Yeah, in the rear view. I got you. Okay. Yes. Best state wealth management teams for Utah, as well as Advisor Hub's fastest growing advisors to watch under $1 billion. And the receivers of the Ameriprise Client Experience Award. You can find them at planwithbaxter.com. And this is a podcast only, but for those of you watching the video, I got a new prescription for my sunglasses, my contacts. My contacts allow me to see like road signs on Mars, but I can't see my computer in front of my face without using readers. It's one of those prescriptions. I'll have to adjust that at some point when I go back. But I'm like, I'm not paying for new contacts just because I can see you guys great.
Through,
yeah,
right?
Like you guys look great from here. But then I go to look at my computer, I'm like, I don't know if I can't see. It's all a little blurry, So. Anyway,
signs you're aging.
Oh, 100%, 100%. So we'll throw the readers on, and then boom, everything just comes beautiful view. It's so crazy. So all right, we put this together to ask your partners. Now, Rex, Brandyn, have you asked your partners these questions?
Ooh, that's a great question. I don't think so. Maybe a couple early on, but in a different
slight caveat,
band.
The financial professionals, the financial planning professionals in the studio on the podcast right now have not gone over these questions.
No, we have definitely. So some of these questions, yes, definitely asked.
Good.
Some of them, you might argue I've force fed. Like, hey, if something happens to me, we're taking it, and just like, that's nice, right? But like, but I guess the inspiration for this is I've multiple times had spouses come to me after meetings or call me after meetings and be like, hey, I just don't. I like this. This makes me uncomfortable. I'm not sure where like I'm at.
The meeting or talking about the money?
Yeah, called after, right?
Okay.
After and just said, hey, I like I'm uncomfortable with where we're at, right? Yeah. And there's not, and it's not uncommon to have one spouse that's maybe a little bit more dominating or a little bit more, into the financial side of things, and so. I think in order to try and combat that and have a more healthy balance, if you, and I'm not a psychologist, right? I'm not saying these are the only questions you should ask. However,
but you play one when you're sitting in front of a family.
A lot of times, yeah. And these are questions as I thought about it and really tried to think through meetings I've had. These questions, if you ask them with a spouse, some of them are probably easy and you're both on the same page. Like, yeah. This is we've talked about this, but there's other things that spouses, don't talk about, and spouses, significant others, anytime you're sharing finances with someone, I think you should probably talk through these things. And talking through these things increases that communication. And a lot of times communication will solve the problem, right? If you don't communicate, tension builds. And that's what, that tension building over time causes long-term problems.
Should we
tension can build when you talk through the items too, though. I mean, because if you don't agree and you can't come to a compromise, to where you agree to disagree and you agree to meet in the middle.
Can you guys navigate that? I mean, was that what you do with couple? Where how do you? If this happens, can they dial a financial planner? Like
yeah. And I would say usually we're able to add the third party perspective.
Yeah.
Right. Because and there's a caveat here. Two rational adults can have two different sets of goals and still
100%.
come to agreement with, hey, all right, this is how we're going to work this out.
What you don't want to run up against, and what we're hoping this doesn't happen, but these are questions. Listen, you got to get it out there, right? Is that you uncover secrets or someone who's stubborn to talk about it because there is a secret.
Well,
of
or
some
you
kind.
get an irrational thought pattern, right? It's so emotional to where, and let's just use an example, right? Let's say I want my checking account balance to be X every month, right? And not go under a certain dollar amount every month. And the other spouse is like, why? You've got this credit line. Who cares, right? If it goes under X, we can just build it back up and dip down into the credit line and come back up. And I'm super comfortable with that. And the other spouse is not. Then, but because one is emotional, they're like, I want to buy this item and it's going to take you under your 500, but I really want this item and I'm emotional about it. And so we're going to get it. And that's where tension can build, whether you talk about it or not. And so I do think that talking about it can help relieve that and can help you navigate that a little bit better. But to think it's going to solve all of the tension, it probably isn't accurate.
Maybe not all of it, but I think it can.
But it helps.
Yeah, and just understand, like I've got a threshold, right? And if my bank accounts are over this, I become fun Brandon, right? It's like, hey, we can, Jess is like, hey, let's go do that. And I'm like, yeah, let's go do that, right? Like that pain and that stress goes away. And while we were putting ourselves through college and working through, I know that my wife was worried that I would be just this like tight, money, just like trying to hoard all the money my whole, but then once we kind of started getting a little bit more cash flow, a little bit more in savings, it becomes easier. And I think helping people communicate that, right? That no, I want to spend money too. I want to do things. I want to do a lot of times the same things you want to do. I just need to have a little bit more in savings to feel comfortable about that. And so anyway,
that's funny.
All right,
I'm
let's
not
dive
sure
in.
Jenny. I'm not sure Jenny believes. My wife believes that there's a fun Rex.
So there's a fun behind the curtain.
I've seen fun Rex. I feel like I watched Maria Bartiromo on Fox Business in the mornings, and she does this the entire show. It's like glasses on, glasses off, because she's looking at the monitors or whatever out there,
right?
And who she's talking to, and then as soon as she has to read her little script or anything in front of her, glasses on. Oh, this is going to take some getting used to. I don't know about this.
Oh, all right.
Okay, so question
set
number
the bar
one.
high, Maria.
Yeah, is a hypothetical. If you were given, I love hypotheticals because you can answer them. It's a hypothetical. You can do whatever the hell you want. If you were given an extra $10,000 today with no strings attached, what would you buy and why? Brandon, why is this an important question?
Yeah, I think really the idea of this question is if you ask a partner and say, hey, if this is, if you had 10 grand, what would you buy? I worry a lot of times the answer might surprise you, right? That spouses aren't communicating enough to know if they had $10,000, like what is it that is that they would really, really want to have. And I think communicating that and that $10,000 thing changes all the time, right? Whether it's a bike or whether it's, an ATV or a trailer or, whatever it is, I think that, or a trip, right? Like I think
savings and investments.
Or savings and investments, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the no strings attached. But maybe that's it, right? Maybe it's just in savings. But I think it's a good question to ask to understand, where at a $10,000 threshold, which is usually attainable, by people, we can make that happen. What is it that you would do with $10,000?
And then you expand it. Oh, sorry.
I think it's an interesting question because it brings up the thought pattern that you're going through such as am I a spender or a saver? If all of a sudden I had an extra 10 grand, what am I doing with that? Am I paying down debt? Am I going on a trip? Am I putting it into a savings account? Right? What am I doing with that money? And it'll start to show kind of a thought process pattern of how your spouse thinks about money. When I sell a car and all of a sudden I get 10 grand, what are we going to do with that 10 grand? If all of a sudden somebody passes and we inherit a lump sum of some funds, then what are we going to do with those funds? And it helps you guys just talk through and get on the same page a little bit for when those events happen throughout life, because they absolutely happen throughout life. It would be interesting because my guess is I believe that people change a lot through their 20s. And once you get past your 20s, a lot of your personality is fairly well set, and your habits and the way that you approach money is fairly set after your past your 20s. So it would be interesting a little bit. I don't know if, people that are listening
Like
that are younger
revisit
to
these
this.
questions when they age.
But I'd be curious if, to have them ask their significant other or whoever you're dating or whoever you're married to in your early 20s versus your late 20s, and kind of revisit the questions periodically throughout life, I think would be good.
And then you expand, Brandon, to, what if you got 250,000?
Yeah.
What if you got 500,000? Which then these answers become fun.
Yeah, well, and those are not just random numbers. I chose 250,000 because a lot of times that is an inheritance, and it depends, and everyone's situation is different. But a lot of times it's $100,000 to $300,000, right? By the time everything's paid for and you split it between all the kids, and so that's a real question that people are asking themselves frequently, and I think it's good, like those are the bigger things, right? Would we want to buy a cabin or a boat or go on more vacations or take the kid? What is it that you'd want to do? And I think one thing that Rex has taught me that is really good is really just kind of helping plant ideas in advance, right? Like plant ideas, let someone think about it, let someone, and better decisions seem to be made when you do that. And so I think that's a good one. And then my last one was actually $500. Right?
Oh, I thought it was not 500,000.
Which would be fun, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's fun to dream and think, yeah, man, if 500,000 fell in my lap, what did I do? But $500, right? What would you do? That's like, if you go out on a Saturday and you're just gonna kind of let loose, this is about $500. I think. I guess I'm sure people could spend more than that. But what would it be, right? Like what would that day look like? If you were just going to go spend $500 and not worry about it. And I think those things, asking those questions can help you get to know someone better and what's really kind of in their head when they're not trying to be very responsible or conscious with their money.
You expanded on that as some options like financial goals, vacation goals, and are there things in our day-to-day life that you feel you're missing that maybe that 250,000 or 10,000 would help with? Yeah,
as well as what things, could we maybe save on, right? What things are we doing every day? Maybe we're door dashing and that's costing a fortune, or maybe we're going out to eat a lot, or I think one thing I've noticed a lot in doing financial planning is a lot of times we'll put together a reverse engineered budget for someone. We'll say, all right, this is how much you're spending on a monthly basis, and they're like, there's no way. But I look at the statements and you're right? Like we are, but where's that all going? And is that right? Is that wrong? I don't know. But I think if you can make conscious decisions in life, right? Maybe we forego some of the eating out and we're able to go take the family on a cruise. And maybe that's more memorable than eating out more, or maybe not, right? Maybe you're like, hey, forget a cruise, right? I don't want to go on a cruise. I want to have the conveniences. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but I think making a conscious decision and making sure that both partners are involved in that decision and feel comfortable with that decision, I think can be a really powerful thing.
Yeah, I think the tension comes a lot of times, to use your DoorDash and cruise example, because that's a great example, is that a lot of times the spouses aren't on the same page. And so you might have one spouse that really wants to save for a goal or a vacation, or wants to feel more comfortable with a higher savings balance in their checking account, savings account, whatever the case may be. And the other spouse is busy running kids around, just living life, and that convenience is significantly more valuable to them in their life than the security of having the higher balance. And so the spouses just aren't on the same page in what carries more utility to that family.
Yeah.
And I think that's the discussion that needs to come out and be had, and say, look, I understand that you value that convenience, and that's very important, your happiness and your convenience, and being able to remove the stress of having to come home and cook, or having to run to the grocery store yourself, or things like that is valuable, and you're spending more time with the kids, and that's valuable to us as a family. But so is the security that if all of a sudden, we lose a transmission in the car, I want some extra savings here so that that's not put on a credit card and a huge stress kind of piece. And so being able to talk through that rationally and removing the emotions. The problem is that so often we get emotional about it, right, and we have a hard time seeing the viewpoint of the other spouse because we're so passionate about our viewpoint, is where that tension creeps in. And so if there's a way to to have these discussions instead of in the heat of the moment early on in the relationship, it's a lot easier to have that because it's not quite as packed with the emotions of it.
Yeah.
I got emotional over DoorDash.
Did you?
Yeah, I hate it. I hate it. And not my spouse, but my daughter. And I'm like,
You hate your dog? No.
yeah.
He loves his daughter.
Love them both. Hate DoorDash. But I told my daughter, I'm like, that DoorDash shows up to our house one more time. Like, so good news is when they're, in their early 20s and they're still on your phone plan and I pay their phone plan, I got leverage there.
Yeah.
And I was like, that phone's yours. Like, I'm cutting you off. You can go get your own phone, and because you are wasting money. I don't know. Is it just me? Why am I so emotional about that one kills me because I'm like, you're paying for two things, and you're just being and it's just to be convenient. I guess I don't know. That one. That's emotional for me. The DoorDash.
It's hard because it does almost. I don't know what the margin is on that, but it definitely increases the cost of the food by 50 to 100% by the time you get tip and delivery fee and everything else kind of wrapped in, and so I think because when we were younger, we didn't have right. We had to either make it or drive to the.
We had ramen
store. We had ramen.
Peanut butter and jelly
we had rice and beans.
Yeah,
right. We had those kinds of things, and so
I'd have a dude show up at my house with a fresh burrito. That's for sure. That never happened.
But I think that's why we're frustrated by it.
Maybe I'm jealous.
When I was young, I had to walk uphill both ways to go get my burrito.
Yeah.
But it's not just DoorDash, right? Like you have hobbies that can get wild expensive, right?
Yeah.
Getting into cars or getting into like high performance, ATVs and things. I mean, it's wild how much money
the spending,
boating, any of those things, right?
Buy a boat, and that's a lot of fun. You've got, cosmetics, right? Or can be very expensive.
What about dancing?
Yeah, I've heard of that.
I hear that's fairly inexpensive.
Oh, is that inexpensive?
Oh, maybe not.
Okay.
Yeah, dancing's an expensive.
I don't think it's one thing, right? I think there's a lot of things, but being able to sit down and say, all right, here's our monthly budget. This is what we have, and what's your top priority? And maybe it is food convenience and great. All right, let's budget that in. For me, my top priority is maybe it's going on a cruise, right? And you can budget some out. And what's your second priority, right? And kind of work your way down and try and figure out, all right, here's our income, here's what has to go out to pay the mortgage and the bills, here's what should be left over. How do we divide that up? And I don't think it needs to be an equal split, right? Or an equal divide, but even just saying, all right, if we can just save $300 a month for a cruise, that's going to save enough over, X amount of years that I can pay for that. And so I don't know. I think having the conversation is worth having.
We're so good at justifying things as humans, right? And so, you go through that budget and you end up with, maybe $300 at the end of the month left over, whatever the amount is, right? And all of a sudden, halfway through the month, you see something and you're like, oh my gosh, my kids are young only once.
Yeah.
I need this, because they're only going to be young for so long. And so we can only do this for a couple of years. And yet that same thought process permeates throughout every stage of life. And so you convince yourself that it's only pertinent to this stage of life, to this age.
Yeah.
And yet when they're done with the 13 to 16 year age, now they're in the 18 to 22 age, and now we've got, they're only going to experience college once in their life.
And it's important that we get them off on the right foot.
Right.
And
Whatever it is.
and then you have grandkids.
On the last of the podcast, where 99% of the people in the world can't afford all the things.
Yeah.
So you've got to make decisions.
But they want to.
But they want to. Yeah. All right. So the next one is the hypothetical would be, how much do you need in the bank to feel comfortable? At what point do you start feeling anxious? And then at what dollar amount do you start thinking about your next big purchase or experience? Okay, I'm not sure what that means.
I think there's a
but
threshold.
How much do you need?
Right. So for me, right, if I start seeing the accounts hit a certain level, like I don't feel good, right? Like I'm like nervous. I'm like, oh, what if, kind of like Rex said, what if a transmission goes and this and then, and would we be able to solve it and figure it out and, put it on a credit card? Like, sure, I'm sure. Yeah, we'd figure it out. But it makes me really nervous and very uncomfortable to be below a certain amount. But then there's another, once I start getting above that, I start, looking at different things and like, hey, Jess, we could go do this, or and so I think that's a fairly normal thing for people. Right. And I think understanding that all people have different thresholds, right? Some people literally are happy as a clam with $1,000 in savings. And then some people need to have more. Right. And some people, once they got $5,000 in savings, they are looking for something to spend it on, right? And other people, it needs to be more. And so I think having those conversations and just knowing where your spouse is at with those, like what is it that makes you feel comfortable? I think consciously being aware of that and considerate of your partner, it makes a big difference in the relationship.
I think you're exactly right. As far as that, everybody's going to have a different comfort level at a different amount, right? Whether it's $1,000 or $5,000 or $10,000, whatever that amount is. The thing that's interesting a little bit to me is that it doesn't matter their wealth, as to where that dollar amount sits. You'll have some of the wealthiest people that are very comfortable not maintaining a balance and going on their credit lines and equity lines and riding the debt up and down throughout the given month. And you'll have some of the wealthiest people that abhor that, and they want to keep
$200,000 in the checking account.
Yeah, $600,000 in the checking account. Some astronomical uninsured amount, right? And they're more comfortable with that in the checking account as opposed to anywhere else. And so this is not a wealth question. Yeah. This is an income question. It's much more of just your personality and kind of your psychology around money and how you treat it.
But I think this is where if you can yield to a spouse to help them feel comfortable and stable financially, it can have a lot of dividends. And even if it doesn't make sense to you, right? Even if you're like, what on earth? Why are we keeping $50,000? We could do so much more with $50,000. We could invest. We could cut that down to 20 and invest the rest. Like I see, couples that will just do it anyway, right? One spouse is like, this kills me, right? I've calculated how much I'm losing in interest every year, but it helps them feel more comfortable and confident, and it makes them a better spouse, right? Or a better partner.
Yeah, I think going into these conversations, I think having a mindset of assuming the best, right? Assuming that your spouse wants the best for your family as well as you do, and coming at it from that angle, such as, and again, back to your DoorDash example, right? It's not that she's trying to bankrupt the family through extra DoorDash fees or anything like that. Right. It's that she's trying to create an additional experience for the family and spending more time with the family and looking at the best, purpose of what she's trying to accomplish or he's trying to accomplish on whatever that goal is. Whether he's saying, hey, look, I want to make sure that we don't go into debt, therefore I want X amount more in my checking balance to make sure that we've got that cushion. You still want to assume that he's wanting the best, not that he's trying to hoard money and keep you from doing whatever it is that you're passionate about. And so if you can assume the best and come at that with some grace and come at that with trying to understand and educate yourselves between each other, then I think it's much easier to come to a common ground.
Right. And I think that's where using a financial advisor can really help with that, right?
Because they can help mediate that conversation.
And help the nervous spouse feel more comfortable. I've been involved in countless of those where it's like, no, we're on track for retirement, and we've got this extra money that you can go and take and go to Disneyland. We'll still have enough in savings, right? We've gone through all the scenarios. You're in a good place. You're properly insured. You've got your retirement on track. You can go and spend this. And having that financial advisor, that third party to tell them, no, you're good, can help a spouse maybe let go a little bit and help them find like, okay, we can do this and we're going to be all right. And I can let this spouse build the memories or whatever that they feel like they need to do.
Some of the happiest relationships I see out there is when these couples are on the same page.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Is when they are aligned and understand what each other is trying to accomplish, and they're actually the biggest cheerleader and supporter of each other's goals of what they're trying to do.
Even if they don't agree.
Right. those typically are some of the, at least from an outsider's perspective, some of the healthiest relationships,
right,
and most communicative and longest lasting relationships that I've seen out there.
And I think I'm going to assume, but I'm going to assume that if you're fighting over money and finances, it's going to lead to fights about a bunch of it. So if you're not fighting over money and finances, you're probably good in a lot of other spaces.
Well, it permeates other areas of your life.
Yeah.
Right? As if you're in that much disharmony in one area, such as finance and money, then all of a sudden you're going to be chippy with each other when you're trying to make another decision. And so it's just going to permeate all the other areas of your life. And so we're just here to try and help you all get along.
Well, we don't want any chippiness. Let's get dark, shall we?
Let's do it.
If I passed away today, how would you feel financially? I'll just pose the question for me. But that is the next question. So question number 3 of what you should ask your partner is, if one of us passes away today, and go back and forth with that, how would you feel financially? And then I like your follow-ups, Brandon. Do you know where the passwords and the accounts are located? Do you know what money would be available? How would your financial life change? And are you comfortable with where we're at now? What happens to the kids, which is an important question, if we both pass away?
Yeah, those are great estate planning questions for sure. And it's amazing to me how often, especially younger couples, just avoid it. And I'm not sure it's intentional that they're avoiding it, but they just feel like I'm going to live forever at this stage, and not really recognizing their own mortality, that accidents happen. And so frequently when that accident does happen, it's such an upheaval in your life that they're not prepared. They don't know where the passwords are. They don't know, where different monies are at, and how are you moving money to pay the utility bill, and where's that coming from, and what's going to happen as far as the family. Are we okay with life insurance? Are we okay with assets and income, and are we going to be okay? And all that stress just hits you at once. Plus the reality that now you're a single parent trying to make a living and raise kids and everything else. And so having those discussions are critically important. I always joke with Brandon, and because clients say it all the time, is when we ask the question, well, if you passed away today, how's everything going to go financially? And everybody jokes, oh, I'm dead, I'm going to be fine, I'm going to feel fine about my finances, I don't care, I'm gone. And people joke about that, and the reality is they do care. The reality is, that if you're in a good, healthy relationship, you do care how your significant other is going to be and how the kids are going to be raised, and you want them taken care of, and you want the best for them. Yeah. And so it's fine to joke about that for a second, but then you need to get serious for a minute.
Yeah. Brandon?
A lot of times just having the conversation, because there's no perfect, answer for life insurance. How much life insurance do you need? Usually we can give you really good guidelines if you can tell us what you would want to have happen. And so, in a typical financial plan, it's really important to have some life insurance in place early on. If you got a young family, right, people financially dependent on you, not a lot of assets accumulated yet, you can go out and buy life insurance, like a term policy, for very inexpensive, that covers and provides that lump sum and that cash flow in the event that you pass away. As you get closer to retirement, sometimes that life insurance becomes less important, right? And eventually, sometimes the need just goes away altogether. In fact, usually it goes away altogether once we've built up enough assets to cover it. And so, but walking through that, because a lot of times people don't consciously, we try to, in all our annual reviews and talk to people about it. But sometimes people haven't thought about it, and just talking through and say, all right, how much life insurance do you have through work? Do you have this extra term policy? Do you have, we've got these investment accounts. Like, if you were to pass away today, how do I pay the bills, and how does life go on? And is that a good, when we look at how that looks, is that a good number, or do we need to make some adjustments? And again, that's where a good financial advisor, we can help you do that and help you figure that number out.
Plus, I think a financial advisor is going to help you check all the boxes that are important on those questions, right? Do we have powers of attorney set up for each other in case we don't pass and we're just incapacitated, right? We're in a coma or vegetable state for a period of time. Is that contingency taken care of. What happens to the kids if we both pass? Who's going to raise them? Where are they going to be? How does our estate help fund that? What can those dollars be used for the kids? And going through all those different questions that we've had in the estate planning podcasts is important. So I think that's really where a financial advisor can help, is to help you organize your thoughts and make sure that you're not skipping over or minimizing things that you may think are taken care of, and they might not be quite as taken care of as you imagined.
Brandyn, you got some more numbers?
Yeah, you bet. So I want to actually talk about Social Security and the solvency of Social Security, because anytime we bring up Social Security when we're financial planning, it's, I don't know, what did you say? 75% of the time people roll their eyes and if it's even going to be there,
or higher. Yeah.
Right.
It's a big number.
It's almost every time. So I like to bring up, and they come out and they have updated numbers every so often. They usually fall in this kind of range. So I've kind of made a range that I've seen. But Social Security is likely going to be in a really bad place once all the baby boomers have gone from paying into the system to all, rightfully pulling out of the system. In the Social Security Trust Fund predicts that they'll run out of money, right? The trust fund will be drained down to zero between 2031 and 2035.
Ooh,
that's
not very far away.
No. It's not.
No.
Yeah. $0 left. But what a lot of times people fail to realize is you still have people paying into the system, right? People that are working ages 16 to 65 are still paying in and earning income and paying that Social Security tax. And they project, this is after all the baby boomers have switched over from, paying in to pulling out, and it's in a really bad place. They project that the amount of income coming in will cover approximately 76 to 79% of the benefits they've promised to pay out.
This is so we got like 5-6 years before we go full Ponzi.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, when I talk to people about this, right, I don't know if that's good news or bad news, but I think what it means is kind of, if governments don't change anything, if politicians just turn their back on the retired generation, which good luck getting elected if you do that, right? But even if they did that, you're still going to get 3/4 of your check, more likely than not, right? It's hard to paint a scenario where you don't get 3/4 of your check.
Population collapse.
Yeah, but that takes time, right? And that's projecting
10 years, 30 years.
That's projecting for the population.
But we're not China or Japan, where they've done some things that are
right, where they're limiting childbirth and different things like that. We're not in that state.
No,
we're one of the few developed nations of the world that we can literally turn on a switch and infuse people into our nation if we wanted to, right? There's a lot of ways around this, and even there's ways to solve that gap, right? I mean, there's a lot of levers they can pull. They can, once you're making more, I think this year it's about $176,000 a year, right? You stop paying into Social Security. If they lifted that cap a lot more, that would help fund it. I've heard numbers like 3%. Adding 3% tax on top of where they're at with Social Security funds it, right? You can push retirement dates back. So there's a lot of things that can happen. I think a lot of times we talk to people and they're like, oh yeah, Social Security is just going to go away, and they're going to write one last, sorry, we don't have any more money, good luck, right? And I don't think that's a very likely scenario.
I'm waiting for the Dumb and Dumber version. They're just going to mail me an IOU
with an Alfred E. Newman picture on the dollar bill or something.
Yeah. U.S. government IOU. Cash this in when we get more.
IOU in 2150, because you'll be gone by then. I think I agree with Brandyn. Most of the time our politicians, in my opinion, are going to wait until the 11th hour to make those changes.
They have to. You're not going to get elected otherwise. I mean, you can't go out there and campaign on, I'm going to slice these programs so that they're solvent, because for whatever reason, not enough of the voter population gets the importance of that.
Well, I don't think it's an argument of I'm going to slice the programs. I think it's an argument of, the messaging. If they do it early, the messaging is I'm raising your taxes and I'm delaying your retirement, right? Yeah. That's the messaging. Okay. If you wait until the final hour, then the messaging is I am saving the day. I am saving the program.
Bingo, yeah.
And so it just comes down to the messaging and the timing of the messaging, in my
You should
opinion.
be a politician.
Let's not start that rumor.
Oh, so it has been started. Yeah.
So,
What do
but
you-
I think these can be made, right? And I think that my opinion is that they will be made and that these changes will take hold and that Social Security will be pushed out another 20 or 30 years with a few of these changes that'll be modified over the next 5 or 6 years. But I think we're going to wait until the 11th hour would be my opinion. And so it'll make people nervous and frustrated and one more reason for us to have a divergence in political discussions, right?
I'm not looking forward to that.
It's not on your top 10
No,
list.
that sucks. Yeah. All right. The next question, this is question 4 to ask each other so that you can get on the same page financially it's similar to like, what if I die? But what if it gets disabled, like due to disease, cancer, accident, etc.? What is our plan financially? Do we have disability insurance? What about changes in a career? Which is it's like a financial disability for a hot minute in case you lose income, I guess, Brandon.
I should know this stat off, and maybe you do, Brandon, know this stat off the top of my head. I don't, but I remember hearing a stat that you're X% more likely to experience disability during your working life than you are death.
Yeah, it's dramatically.
Yeah, it's like
stat.
80% or
Just kidding.
something. It's a big number.
Yeah,
that you're more likely to experience a disability than you are,
for 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, longer term disability.
While you fight
Oh.
cancer, while you fight some sort of bone issue, it's amazing. But then you think about it, and you're like, oh yeah, I did know this person who had to, fight
Right, they were in a
this.
car accident
Right.
and they were laid up for 2 years as they recouped and recovered, or a
Right,
skiing
where they had some
accident, or-
crazy disease that came up and no one could figure out for 3, 4, 5 years, and they weren't able to go to work.
Right, some skin eating. Oh, I'm just kidding. So,
Wow.
let's
Yeah.
get specific, right?
Do you need to tell us something?
So I think, and I think disability insurance is one of the least understood of the insurance family and least appreciated of the insurance family. And so a lot of times you'll have, if you're with a decent sized company, most of the time you'll have a company sponsored disability insurance policy that may cover up to about 60 to 66% of your gross income, right? And lots of times you have to read through the policy. Does that exclude my bonus? Does that exclude overtime pay? Does it exclude? And so they have all these exclusions that may or may not apply to yours. And so you want to make sure you understand it. What does this apply to? What does this not apply to? And then also, does it apply to, is there a cap? A lot of times you'll have a cap of up to $5,000 a month or up to $15,000 a month. And so, and if you're making $20,000 a month and it's capped out at 15 or at 5, then you've got a big gap on your disability policy. And so that's an issue. If it doesn't work cohesively with Social Security disability, right? To where it drops down in coverage, and so you actually have less coverage than you think, and until the Social Security disability kicks in. And so there's a lot of nuances that you want to make sure and understand on the disability to see if you need a supplemental policy to complement your work policy. And then if you work for a smaller company, a lot of times they won't have disability policies on smaller companies because the company doesn't have the financing or the cash flow yet to carry that as a
self-employed or
benefit.
something.
Right. Or if you're self-employed,
Yeah.
then you don't have it. Or if you're employed and you have a side hustle and your family's banking on that side hustle money to live day to day, and all of a sudden you get, disabled, then you certainly don't have the side hustle money and you're only insured for the regular W-2 wages. So I think this is an area that gets overlooked a lot and should definitely be part of that discussion with your spouse as to what does happen. How covered are we? How important to us is this? And do we have the capability to scale back down to whatever that insurance level is? Again, to use the 15,000 and 20,000 example, I'm making 20 and I'm insured in 15. They could look at it and say, yeah, we have a lot of discretionary income. We probably could cut back and still live a good, happy, healthy life if we had to scale back. Whereas if you look at other people and they may look at that and say, yeah, no, I'm not scaling back. That's not going to work for us. We want to make sure and have that covered. So
So outside of disability provided through work, where can someone go to find more disability insurance?
So it's funny you ask that, Brandon, because you could talk to a financial advisor. So you can go to Baxter.
Plan with Baxter.
Yeah, planwithbaxter.com and connect up with us, and we can talk you through kind of your options. But there are a lot of disability policies, private disability policies that are out there. There's a lot of nuances, right? Such as, are you disabled to where you can't do your own occupation? Or can you not do any occupation?
Yeah.
Right? And so there's a lot of nuances and jargon involved in disability policies, to where you want to make sure you understand and you know the right questions to ask to make sure the coverage is appropriate for what you're looking for. But they're not very expensive. Disability policies typically are not overly expensive, to where you may be looking at, a range of maybe $50 to a couple $100 a month, kind of thing, depending upon how much additional insurance you're looking for,
and your career,
your career.
If you have a more risk-prone career, right, or a more difficult career, sometimes those are more expensive.
Like a fly diving instructor might be a little more expensive.
Skydiving.
Skydiving. Fly diving? Skydiving. Skydiving instructor might be more expensive to insure.
Difficult. Yeah.
I was thinking like underwater welder and the oil tankers.
Yep.
Yeah, that could be more expensive
that would be
to insure.
more or impossible sometimes, But I think ultimately what happens when you've had these discussions, right? And you said, all right, if we're both alive, we're happy, we've melded our finances, right? We're happy with that outcome. If something happens to me, you're taken care of. If something happens to you, I'm taken care of. If one of us becomes disabled, we've got a plan to work through this. And I don't, say that's a good idea to just sit and worry about things. But sometimes if you can just go through and solve them, and a lot of times it's easily solvable, right? When you look at how much term life insurance costs, or when you look at how much disability insurance costs, like the costs relative to your income, your overall lifestyle are so small, but we can really solidify a financial plan and help protect it against the unknowns. It can give you incredible amounts of peace of mind, right? And I think I'd add to that, maybe get your estate planning done, right? So if something happens to you, all right, our kids are taken care of, money's going to go into a trust. I know who's going to take care of my kids. I know how much money is going to be funneled that way. Like it just helps you feel good. You never know what's going to happen in life, but it's nice. It's nice when you can get all these things in place and just have confidence going forward that whatever happens, there's a plan for it.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to the next one. Last one, number 5. This is the last question. If you're still with your spouse or partner, whatever.
After the first 4, if you're still together,
we got
still
one
having
more.
the conversation. Let's see if this puts you over the edge.
Okay, this will do it here. How do you feel about our marriage? No. How do you feel about our investment strategy, I guess, in general, overall? Does it make you nervous when markets go over down? Okay, so I'm assuming many partners just, if one of them's in charge, they don't really care what the markets are doing if they're comfortable. So, yeah, how do you feel about the overall strategy, Brandon?
But sometimes, a lot of times, right? One spouse will be like, "Oh yeah, I'm good. Like let's get this aggressive. Let's grow this. I'm comfortable. I don't worry. I understand the markets. I get that there will be bounces and ways it'll come back." And then you get another spouse like, "This freaks me out, right? Like I look at my statement and it's moving around, and sure, we've had great rates of return, but what if we don't, right?" And so I think it is important, right, to talk through the investment strategy and specifically your distribution outlook, right? If we're getting closer to retirement, how much money do we think we need to pull in the next 5 to 10 years? Do we have a plan for if, the next big recession hits? How do we get through that recession? And so I think just having the open dialogue and open communication on this is really important.
A lot of times early in a marriage and earlier in life, you'll have one spouse take the lead on the investments and things like that. And because they've done it, the other spouse becomes a little bit disconnected a lot of times in those early years. But it's interesting because as you get closer to retirement and you get closer to some of those important goals where you're needing the money, then lots of times we'll see the other spouse start to ask questions and start to
get
come
more
alive
interested.
a little bit, start to sometimes get a little more animated even.
Yeah.
And so, seeing that changeover is in a way a little bit fun, right? In a way a little bit scary too, because you can feel that there's a little bit of lack of transparency and communication that's happened over part of the marriage, and you don't want that to translate to distrust between the spouses. You want that so that they are on the same page, because a lot of times they'll either have different risk tolerances to where she's saying, hey, look, I need to make sure I've got a certain amount safe because I'm not comfortable with the volatility and I want to make sure that I always have money to pull from somewhere. And part of that could be a lack of education and not understanding how the portfolio is designed and just needing to be brought up to speed on the portfolio construction. And sometimes it's that the other spouse has been super aggressive and the portfolio is not designed for that safety,
right.
and she's feeling that real uncomfortableness, right? And so going through that, making sure that you're both on the same page, but having that discussion as a couple, I think is critical, and I think you should have that multiple times throughout your marriage to make sure that you are on the same page. Even if one is taking the lead versus the other, you still should be fairly well aligned as to the overall risk, what that means during bear markets and downturns and recessions, what that means on your overall rate of return and hitting your goals over time, and just making sure that we have some alignment there.
Okay. Anything else, Brandon?
Just one experience. My wife just doesn't really care. Right? I think she cares, and she's really grateful that I've done it, but she's not she's not coming up and saying, "Hey, Brandon, where are we at with this?" Right?
Her husband's a financial planner.
Right. And so I'm sure there's some but
there's some trust there, I would hope.
Yeah. But even with that, right? I want her to experience some of the ups and downs of the market today, so that later, right, you're comfortable with that. And so I'll share things like, "Oh yeah, man, that 2022, that was a rough year. We lost this much money," right? And although that's not great news, it's good conditioning, right? To understand hey, markets are going to go down sometimes.
Yeah.
And then, oh, hey, we made it all back a year later and then some, and helping, even though she's not super interested, helping her with experiencing the markets, I think can be a really healthy thing, even though that's not top priority for the day.
As I've gotten older, I start to think about this more. I've noticed the last couple of years about what would happen to my wife, to Jenny, if something happened to me, right? And so
because of that flesh-eating disease, right?
Yeah, that's just a brutal disease. That's a rabbit hole.
That stuff's actually real, man.
It is real. It is a rabbit hole that you can go down, and I hope I never catch that.
Yeah.
That just looks nasty and painful. So I think about this a little more frequently, and I think about what Jenny's she's very busy with family and raising the kids and spending time and doing the important things of life. And so she's not as focused on the finances of our family. And we're both very comfortable with that. We're both very transparent with that. But it does concern me as to, what would she do and things like that. And so, I found it very important to make sure that she has a relationship with Brandon and with our financial advisor, which is Brandon, right? and making sure that that's the first time she has a meaningful financial discussion with him isn't, a week after I pass, right? Yeah. Because you want that trust build up, you want that confidence build up, you want that relationship there, instead of having to create that relationship during the most emotional time. I hope it's emotional for her, during that most emotional time of your life, right?
Depends on the emotion, right?
Yeah, I'm not looking for relief. I'm not looking for... So I think those are good discussions to have, and good discussions to carry that just a step further of how involved does each spouse want to be involved in those financial discussions with your advisor? Do they want to meet with them every time that you meet, whether that's quarterly or semi-annually or trimester or annually, whatever it is? Or do they want to just periodically be involved on some other irregular basis, every other year, every other meeting, every, something like that. And having that page so that they feel like they are getting out of that what they want, and they aren't just being assumed that because they're uninterested that they don't want to be educated on it.
Yeah. Well, thanks, gentlemen, for providing these answers to some of these questions that we should ask our partners. so that we are financially on the same page. I encourage our listeners to do the same and report back if you are still partners. That would be fantastic.
Keep a running tally.
Keep a tally. And then also Brandon and future Mayor Rex, feel free to also do this experiment and report back on our next podcast. That would be fun to hear if you covered any of those questions and what some of the answers were. Thanks for tuning into this podcast. It's produced by the Brandyn Collective, recording in our camp studio here at the Monarch Building inside the historic Arts Nine Rose Arts District on historic 25th Street in Ogden. You can find this podcast interesting. You can consider supporting us at buymeacoffee.com, and you can watch and subscribe to us on YouTube. See our wonderful, beautiful faces. If you only listen to the podcast, you're just getting a fraction of how beautiful we are. So you can follow us on
the best fraction,
the sexy voice fraction. So we are on Facebook as well, on Pines Podcast, and on our Instagram, Pines_podcast. Thank you for tuning in. This has been Through the Pines, reminding you to use yesterday's dollars to finance tomorrow's dreams.